Did you have a sort of rock bottom moment with that? Was there a specific moment that then started your turnaround?
Yes. So I would often wake up in the middle of the night in a state of panic or fear and almost feeling breathless. And one night I woke up again around 3 in the morning and my mind was racing along. And then a strange thought came into my mind that said, I can't live with myself any longer. I can't live with myself any longer. And after thinking that thought, there was a kind of a little shift occurred. I was standing back from that thought, so to speak, and I thought, what a strange thought to think, I can't live with myself. Am I one or am I two? Who is that self that I cannot live with, and who am I? So a kind of inner separation occurred, and I felt like of disappearing into a kind of void. And the next morning I woke up and I felt incredibly peaceful for some reason. I didn't understand why. It took me several years to understand why from that point onward there was always, sometimes in the foreground, sometimes in the background, a sense of inner peace, no matter what my outer circumstances were. But now I can actually explain what happened that night. There was a disidentification in my consciousness from the stream of compulsive and incessant thinking that most people have absolutely no control over. People say, I think, but that is usually not the case because thinking happens to them. They have no control over it. So it is actually wrong to say, I think. It would be the same as you were saying, I'm beating my heart. You're not beating your heart. It's done for you. It happens to you.
Yeah.
So there was this, what I now call the voice in the head, that I was completely identified with. So I was completely identified with the stream of thinking, which is quite normal, many people are. And a lot of that stream of thinking was of a negative nature. So I did not experience the reality around me except through the veil of negative self-talk, the mental veil of negative labeling and interpretations. And my whole, what I consider to be my life, I hadn't realized until I disidentified, what I took to be my life was a narrative in my mind. And it consisted of certain things from the past that I identified with, things that had happened to me. It was a bundle of thoughts that recurred continuously that gave me my sense of self, and it was an unhappy sense of self. It was a narrative-based sense of self. And that night, I stood back from this narrative, which is fueled by continuous thinking. I stood back and I realized for the first time a dimension of consciousness within myself that was deeper, one could also say higher, depends how you want to look at it, deeper than thinking. Now this dimension of consciousness that's deeper than thinking, I now call it awareness, or I sometimes call it presence. And that exists in every human being, but most humans are not aware of it at all. They don't know that there is a deeper dimension of consciousness in them. And that dimension transcends thinking. You experience it when the mind becomes still for a moment. This is what people want to achieve, for example, when they meditate. It can also happen to you when you're engaged in a dangerous activity like mountain climbing. Then you cannot be involved in thinking. You have to, conceptual thinking stops, but you do not lose consciousness. So the important thing is there is a state of consciousness possible in humans where you are fully conscious without the activity of conceptual thinking. That's also the essence, for example, of Zen, and I would suggest that it's actually the essence of all spirituality, is to find that state of consciousness in yourself where you can be alert and aware, but there's no conceptualization in your mind. It doesn't mean it stays like that for a long time. You then go back into thinking. But if you're able to access that dimension in yourself, you are no longer possessed by your thinking mind. You are no longer used by your thinking mind. You are actually able to use your mind instead of being used by your mind. As long as you're used by your mind, all your mental activity is a reflection of the conditioning that has happened to you. Mm-hmm. So you take on the conditioning on a personal level, from school, parental background, and so in that conditions the way that you think. Then you have the collective conditioning around you. You take on the conditioning of the culture that you inhabit, that's around you. If you watch the media every day, then you take on those viewpoints and you think they are your thoughts. Mm-hmm. They are not your thoughts. Mm-hmm. You take these thoughts on from the outside and they become part of your identity. So identity is a key word because identity, everybody is extremely interested in finding their identity. Mm-hmm. One could say that after meeting the needs of food and shelter, almost immediately after that comes the search for an identity, which already starts with a child. When the child has a toy that feels it belongs to me, it's my toy, somebody takes it away, there's great suffering in the child. It cries because the child began to identify with something and called it mine, and that's only the beginning, of course.